Hey everyone, it's TV Girl from Voice of TV, and I'm going to be reviewing Dexter Season 7, Episode 3, Buck the System. So, last week I actually did not see Next Time on Dexter. My DVR cut it off early. But I'm actually kind of glad that I didn't see it based on some of the comments I received on here. And so I'm briefly going to talk about these Next Time on bits. Is it really that hard to find a medium here between spoiling too much and not saying anything? Some Next Times on are frustratingly vague, showing people running around, yelling, scenes flashing so fast you feel like you're about to have an epileptic seizure, and you have no idea what they're talking about. And then some Next Times on, it's like, oh, so that guy gets murdered, huh? And that's the ending of next week's show. Interesting. Apparently, it was very clear that Lewis was going to die in this week's episode, and honestly, I don't want to know that much about next week's episode. There needs to be just enough information about next week's episode to get you excited, but not too much where you feel like you've seen it already. And Lewis died, so yes, not much of a surprise for people who watch Next Time On, so you may not even want to watch Dexter's Next Time Ons if you really enjoy the feeling of not knowing what's going to happen in next week's episode. They're not all like that, but some of them are. This episode was a lot about Dexter wanting freedom from Deborah and Deborah trying to wrestle with her own morals and conscience. First of all, I was surprised that Deborah decided to give Dexter a little bit of space, but it makes sense. How much can Deborah force herself on Dexter? According to the law, obviously, she should have already turned him in, and since she's not and probably never going to, does she really have any grounds to be telling him what to do about anything? So she does agree to back off a little. Dexter even kind of threatens her with, oh, if you don't back off, then I'm really going to do something bad, sort of thing. Deborah's a very loyal sister, that's for sure. And don't you hate how sometimes in shows and in movies and books, how characters just don't ask enough questions or the obvious questions or don't get affected enough by life-altering things around them? Well, this show is excellent in not being that way. Deborah asks all the hard-hitting questions that a normal person should ask, but don't often do in fiction. Deborah wants all the details, from how he feels when he kills someone, why he's going there, why he's doing that, why he feels this way. And she's also constantly giving him that really convincing, totally suspicious glare and doesn't believe a word he says anymore. I love what the writers have done to Deborah and her reaction to Dexter's dark passenger. This is a huge deal and her character is not under-exaggerated at all. She is totally lost and confused. I really like how Dexter just wants to murder everyone and is getting these visions because he misses it so much, from the woman at the post office to even Masuka. Dexter needs to do his thing, and he's probably not lying when he said he would do something really bad if Deborah doesn't back off. I mean, she is very overbearing, but I would say that's a quite natural response if you're trying to fix him. But Deborah still doesn't let him run wild. She doesn't believe him about going to the gym, for example, and I thought it was pretty clever how Dexter knew she'd follow him there and how he tried to show her Spelzer and explain how he's prepping to kill again. So let's move to Lewis real quick. Wow, Lewis has officially been named one of the most pointless characters ever on Dexter. Do the writers just not know what to do with him? Does Dexter just have enough enemies at the moment? I liked how Dexter got him fired and ruined his relationship with his girlfriend, and Lewis had this look of just pure, crazy rage, and I'm thinking, oh wow, maybe something will come of this, but nothing does. So Isaac follows Victor's bracelet to Dexter's boat, and he just happens to show up at the same time that Lewis is sabotaging Dexter's boat. And farewell, Lewis. It's been pointless? Well, at least from that, Isaac now knows that Dexter's behind Vince's murder, basically. Trophies of serial killers were a recurring theme in this episode. We saw Spelzer's trophies, Randall's trophies, and it makes Deborah think about Dexter and his trophies, the blood slides, and how it's not all about helping innocents, but his desire to actually kill. And I have to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the whole Spelzer-Deborah-Dexter storyline. I could tell quite early in the episode that this storyline was just going in a way where probably an innocent would die, so it would shake up Deborah's moral beliefs and core and get her thinking, is Dexter maybe actually doing the right thing here? Everything was so convenient. They just happened to not be able to connect with one another, and Deborah happens to come by to the house in the middle of Spelzer killing someone, and Dexter just happens to show up in the nick of time to save Deb, and they also find the girl dead, the innocent. I don't know if there's a stronger way for this show to say, from Deborah's point of view, Look, Deborah, look what happens when you don't listen to Dexter. Innocent people die. Let your conscience mull over that one. It's obviously not as black and white as that, and Deborah knows it, but that whole storyline was a little contrived and pushy to me. Oh, and the room in that house looked like it should be in a new Hostel movie or something. Very odd and creepy. I did, however, like Deborah's response in the end for the most part. I'm really glad the writers didn't decide to make them a murdering brother-sister duo. Well, not yet at least, because that would have just been a little far-fetched. But it looks to me now that Deborah understands at least somewhat where Dexter's coming from. And since she's letting him go back home, is that a free pass now for Dexter to kill evil people? Quinn and Nadia are an item now. I like Nadia for some reason. I guess I appreciated the honesty with Quinn. It's so common for shows to have a character play both sides. So for her to be straight with Quinn and tell him the truth was a refreshing change from what I normally see on television. But why do I have this feeling, though, that she's going to die a tragic death? Or is that just the fate of most minor characters on the show? They make a good couple, and it makes me think, God, how were Quinn and Deb ever together? I don't think they could be more polar opposites. Wow. We saw LaGuerta briefly, who we can only assume is still really focused on possibly reopening the Bay Harbor Butcher case. When Deborah comes in and tries to get a warrant, I think she realized that the way LaGuerta was treating her was sort of the way Deborah treats Dexter. Like, let's follow the law will take care of everything. And since LaGuerta just talks so much nonsense, BS, and is a pretty nasty, unlikable character, that must have screwed with Deborah's mind a little bit. So we have a new character, Ms. Hannah McKay, the accomplice to Randall's murders. Remember that dude last week that threw himself in front of a bus? Well, she is played by the lovely Yvonne Strahovski. You may know her from the retired NBC show Chuck, or more importantly, as Miranda Lawson from the Mass Effect trilogy. Some of my favorite games ever. Anyway, it seems like we have enough characters, and a lot of them just aren't even getting enough attention, so adding a new character seems a little strange to me, but this could be a really interesting storyline depending on where they decide to go with it. It looks like there's some major chemistry or something going on between her and Dexter. She was really bitchy to him and Batista, but can you really blame her? Speaking of Batista, he actually got in a sentence of feeling in this episode, talking about how the death of Mike has affected him and that there may just be more to life. I really wish they would put a little more attention sometimes on Batista. And LaGuerta, especially Batista. He's been so neglected for quite a while. So, my favorite quotes from this show. Both from Deborah, big surprise. You're fucking with my head. That's what she said to Dexter when he was somewhat trying to convince her that what he was doing was a good thing. She's so perceptive. I love her. And the second one was outside of Spelzer's when she almost decided to leave and said, "Night, night, fuckface." That was just funny. Overall, I enjoyed this episode, although I did like last week's more. I didn't really enjoy the Spelzer storyline, and the demise of Lewis, kind of lame. But I like that the Ukrainian mob is finally connecting itself with Dexter, so there's a chance they will become more interesting. I enjoyed the addition of Hannah, I think. It's a little too early to tell, obviously. We saw her for like 2 minutes. I like Nadia, but I'm not sure where it's going to go with Quinn, and so far all I see is tragic death written all over her face. Acting, obviously amazing as usual. I know I always say it, but I love you, Jennifer Carpenter. You don't just play Deborah Morgan, you are Deborah Morgan. Even though the script tells her what to say, obviously, she is just so convincing, and the expressions on her face, the way she acts, is incredibly impressive. So, some unanswered questions. Is there going to be a showdown between Dexter and Isaac next week? Isaac's on to him, we know that, so I think it's quite inevitable. How far is Deborah going to back off of Dexter, and what exactly is she going to do, if anything, to try to help him now? She's giving up on this idea of keeping him hostage, or rehab, as she calls it, so I wonder if she plans to take any other measures to help try to control his urges. Anything going to come from Lewis's death, or will anyone care? LaGuerta, you can see it on her face, is really on this Bay Harbor Butcher case. It's totally just taking over her. So since we basically didn't deal with that at all this episode, I assume next week that story is going to progress. I still believe that LaGuerta may meet her maker by the end of the season. Hannah McKay, what is her deal? And chances of her and Dexter getting it on, what do you think? 99%? Obviously a little less important, but what is going to happen between Quinn and Nadia? Is she going to feed false information to Isaac from Quinn? Or maybe she's actually playing Quinn. That would be more devious than I'd hoped for, but I wouldn't put anything past the characters on the show. So I would really love to hear your opinions, predictions, thoughts, likes, dislikes. Just tell me everything you thought about this episode. I'm going to give this episode a B. I think it was definitely decent. It felt like a lot of build up to future episodes, but that's not all a bad thing at all. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching, and check out more of my video reviews on shows like Boardwalk Empire, The Walking Dead, Homeland, Sons of Anarchy, and more. All at thevoiceoftv.com, the Voice of TV YouTube channel, and tvgirl.net. See you next week.